So this week's module, hopefully you've already watched this, Strategies for Success. You hopefully should have watched that before today. If you haven't, though, I would encourage you to watch it. It's just me telling you what you should probably do to be successful in class. Then right here, this is a video that I posted before Christmas, actually. And this is the lesson for this week. It's section 6.1 and 6.2, and it's a YouTube video of me explaining all that content. And I use a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation to do that. Here is that presentation if you'd like to have a copy of it. It's available to you. Then below this is more videos, extra videos, in case you still don't understand what's going on. You're like, I still don't understand what he's saying. Maybe you should watch some of these extra videos. Right here is where you're going to find the homework, which is, like I said, through Math Excel for Schools. Here are some extra problems. These are not required. So let's say you get the homework done. You're like, wow, Mr. Allen, that was easy. The homework's done. I still feel like I need more practice. You could go right here to get more practice, and that uses the online textbook. And then the final thing I want to show you here is this. This week right here, this is the link to the notes that I used yesterday in class. So for some reason you were not here yesterday, they're right there. And by the way, can you guess what I'm going to add after we're done with class today? I'm going to add another link that's the notes I just sent you. Just in case you're ever not here, I'm going to try to keep all of those things right here in these modules for you guys to find. So if you ever get confused on what's going on in class, guess what you should do? Go to Canvas, okay? You don't have to email anybody or anything like that. It's all right here in Canvas laid out. And I'm just going to show you, for example, here's next week. I've already got it all done. And it's going to post, actually, it's going to post in an hour and a half at 9 a.m. All of this is going to post for next week. So guess what you should do before you come to class next week? You should watch that video. And then that way, when you come to class next week, you already kind of have some idea of what we're going to do in class. Oh, by the way, here's what I worked on yesterday. Here's the week after that. Before that week begins, guess what you should probably do? You should probably watch that video. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about today's stuff, all right? So we're going to talk about parallelograms. And I was going to have you guys do an activity, but as kind of I thought might happen, we're kind of running a little bit behind here, but that's okay. Are you guys familiar with the parallelogram? Okay. Do you know why they call it a parallelogram? The key is that the opposite sides are
parallel.
Parallel. That's all you need to know. So this is a parallelogram. This is a parallelogram. Heck, all of these shapes are parallelograms. And you'll notice that all of them, the opposite sides are parallel. That's what a parallelogram is. Now, in addition to being parallel, opposite sides being parallel, here are some other very important attributes. This right here, these four things are the key to this assignment. Here they are. Number one, I'll put number one. The opposite sides are congruent. In other words, if I told you that this was 7, can you guys guess what that side's length is? It's 7. Big surprise. If I told you that this side here was 8, guess what this side is?
8.
Because opposite sides are congruent when it's a parallelogram. That's number one. Number two. By the way, I'm going to put a star next to this one because I think this is the one that's probably the hardest for students to remember. In fact, let's skip that. We'll come back to 2. Let's go to 3. Number 3, opposite angles are congruent. So here's what that's saying. If this angle right here is 70 degrees, angle B is 70 degrees, you guys want to take a guess on what angle D is? I'll give you a hint. Opposite angles are congruent.
70 degrees.
It's 70 degrees. Now, let's go back to number 2. Number 2 says consecutive angles are supplementary. Do you guys remember what supplementary means?
Adding up to 180.
That's exactly right. They add up to 180. So consecutive angles are supplementary. Oh, by the way, angle A and angle B are consecutive angles. Consecutive just means they go right after each other. Hey, if angle B is 70, anybody want to take a stab on what angle A is? Can't be 70 because 70 plus 70 is not 180. Anybody in the virtual land can tell me what angle A has to be.
110.
Correct. It has to be 110 degrees because consecutive angles are supplementary. Oh, by the way, if this angle is 110, guess what angle D has to be?
110.
No, it's
70.
consecutive angle here, right? So it has to add up to 180. So it's also
70.
70, but we already knew that, right? Because the opposite angle was 70. Did you see how that works? Oh, by the way, if this is 110, what's that angle down there got to be? It's got to be 110. This isn't really that hard, is it? It's actually pretty intuitive is the word I would use. I would say that this is intuitive. Intuitive means it just kind of naturally makes sense. You can almost look at the picture and see that that's the case. And then finally, the fourth and final property that you guys need to be familiar with today is this one right here. The diagonals bisect each other. Diagonals bisect each other. What the heck does that mean? Here's what that means. And we've seen the word bisect before. It just means that this diagonal cuts this diagonal in half. And the other one does too. In other words, this piece, this little piece right here, is equal to this piece. In fact, maybe I should use some different colors there. Let's try green. You see the red and the green pieces? They have to be equal. Let's do this one blue, and then I'll pick another color. Let's do, not red, pink. Pink it is. And then pink. You see the blue and the pink? They have to be equal. In other words, what I'm saying is if this little segment right there is, let's say, 10, guess what this segment right there has to be?
10.
10. That's all it means to bisect. So how many things do we know true about parallelograms? We got 4. Well, actually, technically we got 5. Does anybody know what the fifth thing is? We've got opposite sides are congruent. We got consecutive angles are supplementary. We got opposite angles are congruent. We got diagonals bisect each other. Does anybody know what the fifth thing is? What's the fifth thing?
Opposite sides are
Sides are parallel. Guys, so there's 5 things about a parallelogram I need you to know. You need to know, the opposite sides are parallel. That's why we call it a parallelogram. You need to know that opposite sides are congruent. That means they're the same length. You need to know that consecutive angles are supplementary. That means they add up to 180. You need to know that opposite angles are congruent. That means that they're equal. And you also need to know that the angles bisect each other, or the diagonals. So let's look at an example here, okay? So we're going to do a couple of examples, 3, and then on the back, I'm going to have you guys practice some on your own, okay? We're actually doing really good on time right now. All right, so I'm going to do these. I'm not going to make you guys try to figure out what these are. So I'm going to tell you the key to each problem. So here's the key to this problem here. Problem number 1. It says find the value of x. The key to this problem is, and I'm going to write the number. Number 2. What does number 2 up here say? Consecutive angles are supplementary. I'm telling you that the key to this problem is that one right there. Because guess what kind of angles these are?
Parallel.
These are what we call consecutive angles. These are consecutive angles. In other words, this one comes right after that one. Or if you want to think about it this way, this one comes right after that one, or the other way. It doesn't matter. And by the way, if these are consecutive angles, then they have to be supplementary. In other words, x plus 60 has to equal how much?
180.
Has to equal 180. That's the key to this problem. By the way, this is a very easy problem to solve. What's the only thing we've got to do?
Subtract 60
Subtract 60 from 180.
120.
And it's 120. Now, For someone like me, I look at a problem like that. That seems very simple, very straightforward, okay? So we're going to do the next problem if you guys don't have any questions. And what I'd like you to do on the next question, the next problem, is I'd like you to look up at the list. I don't want you to actually try to answer it, but I want you to look at the picture, and I want you to try to figure out which of those 5 things is going to be the key to this one. Don't say it. Maybe just write it on your notes or write it on a piece of paper. What's the key to this one? What's the key to this one? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? Or is it 5? So let's go back up here and look. What do you guys think? What do you think?
Number 3.
Number 3. Let's see here. Number 3 says opposite angles are congruent. So let's go down here and look. Do we know any of the angles here?
No.
We don't. So it's not going to be 3. Any other takers?
Could you go back up, please?
Okay. Number 1. Okay, let's go back up and look at number 1. Opposite sides are congruent. So let's see here. Do you guys think that these are opposite sides? Yeah, I think they are. So I think the key here is number 3. Oh, number 3. That's what she said. I'm sorry. It should be number 1. Sang said that one correctly. It should be number 1. Okay, so that's going to be number 1. Key's going to be number 1. And because these are, I'm going to draw a little picture here. These are opposite sides of a parallelogram. Opposite sides of a parallelogram, so they have to be congruent. In other words, x plus 7 has to equal 15. That's what congruent means. They're equal. Again, this is a super easy problem. How do I solve it?
Subtract 7.
Subtract 7, right? This is not, these are easier than that warm-up I gave you, aren't they?
Yeah.
Hey guys, by the way, let's see if we can check that. If you put 8 into this x, if you put 8 right into there, what's 8 plus 7?
15.
Duh, it's 15. That makes sense. Okay. All right, so we've got 2 problems down. I'm going to do one more before I have you guys practice. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the third one. I'm going to do the same thing now. I'm going to go back up to number 1 and number 2 here. Remember, what I think is important is for you to be able to identify whatever the key property is. And by the way, that's our objective today, right? Our objective today is to use the properties of a parallelogram. Okay, so here's the list. There's 1, 2, 3, and then don't forget there's 5 up here. I'll put 5 right there. There's 5 right there. Okay. Now let's look down at number 3. The last one I'm going to do with you guys. I'm going to have you guys do some on your own. Find the value of x and y. So there's the picture. And then there's all the properties. Does anyone in virtual land have any idea of which property you think we're going to use on that third example? Okay, so no one in virtual land speaking up. Bethany, is it Bethany? Is that right? I'm sorry. Serenity. Sorry. Serenity.
Oh, there's number 4, right?
Okay, I don't know. Let's look. So number 4 says the diagonals bisect each other. Well, that's a diagonal, right? And that's a diagonal. So, Serenity, I think you're absolutely right. So I'm going to put the key here is number 4, that the diagonals bisect each other, because this is a diagonal and this here is a diagonal. And if they're diagonals in a parallelogram, they have to bisect each other. So this is going to be congruent to this. This is going to be congruent to this. Now I'm going to warn you, this problem's a little bit harder than the last 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what the algebra looks like here. Okay. So if these are equal, then we know that 3x has to equal y. if these are equal, and I'm going to do this in a different color now, we also know that 4x has to equal y plus 3. Back to my y. So now we're back in Algebra 1 again, and we have what we call a system of linear equations. In other words, we've got two equations with two unknowns. Does anybody have any idea of how we're going to try to solve something like that?
Distribute.
We can't distribute yet.
Oh.
Any ideas?
Add the y.
Say that again.
Add the y. And the
Add the y and the x together?
Yeah.
Okay, kind. If we add them right now, we're going to get in trouble though, right? So here would probably be my recommendation, although there's other ways to do this. I would use something called the substitution method, if you can remember that all the way back from Algebra 1. In other words, what does y equal? Y equals 3x, agreed? So guess what I can put in for this y right here? Well, y is equal to 3x, so I can put 3x in for that. In other words, 4x is equal to, and instead of y, I'm going to put 3x plus 3. Now what do I do? Okay, and so how do I do that in this case?
Subtract
You
3.
need to subtract 3y from 4y. What happens when you subtract 3y from 4y? Or, I'm sorry,
1x.
you just get 1x, or just x, and so guess what x is?
3.
3. So now I got x. How do I find y?
Don't you do the same?
Well, I know what x is. Can I just plug it right back into here?
Yeah.
In other words, y is going to be 3 times 3, which is 9. So x is 3 and y is 9. And that'll give us our answer. We can check that by plugging it back in over here. And I'll do that in green. And please, I do not quite understand why. Oh, there we go. There's the green. Remember, x is 3, right? So what's 3 times 3? That's 9, right? What's y? Well, that's 9. So do those two things equal each other?
Yes.
And we could do the same thing here. Remember, y is 9. What's 9 plus 3? Oh, that's 12. What's 4 times 3?
12.
That's 12. So there we go. Okay, so I have just explained the properties for a polygon that is a parallelogram. There's 5 of them. I've done 3 examples. Now for the remaining time, okay, good, we're doing perfect on time. For the remaining time, what I'm going to ask you to do is go to the second page, and I want you to work on these problems, okay? And what I'm going to do is, those of you guys that are in virtual land, I'm going to put you guys in breakout rooms. If you guys want to join the Google Meet, you can too, or you can just work here either by yourself or with a partner. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys about, let's say, I'm going to do 20 minutes, okay? I don't know that off the top of my head. Give me a second, okay? Let's do timer. Okay, guys, I'm going to send you to your breakout rooms. All right, so they're going into their breakout rooms. Guys, I'm going to have you do this. I got to check a couple of things, and I'm going to quit recording now.